Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, on another edition of WOWSA Live. We're here with host Ned Denison. Ned?
Hello, everyone. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Both Steve and our next guest, Paul Asmuth, are honorees. I want to start by going back to 2010. I was at the induction ceremony at the International Swimming Hall of Fame. Paul Asmuth was being also honored by that organization, and I heard the following things. I heard dominant, I heard elite racer, the first marathon swimmer to train with the best pool swimmers in the world, Mission Viejo, and coach Mark Schubert. So Paul, start by telling us about your swimming career before you won 6 world professional marathon championships.
I was really blessed to have incredible coaches, starting with Jeannie Dunkel, who was a gold medalist in the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. She came on our pool deck when I was about 13 years old, and a little club team in Fort Myers, Florida suddenly became a very serious training center for the kids who were there. And following her, after she was there for 2 years, Coach Greg Troy came. And Greg was just graduated from Texas Christian University, young man, 21 years old. You might know him. He just retired as the head coach of the University of Florida and has coached a lot of famous swimmers over the years, including Brian Lochte and Caleb Dressel right now. And he's an incredible coach. And then I went to Auburn University my freshman year, and then I had Eddie Reese as my coach that year, and he encouraged me to take a year off from collegiate swimming and let my body mature a little bit, and he recommended I go out to Mission Viejo and train with Mark Schubert, where this was right after the Montreal Olympics in 1976, and Brian Goodell was there, Jesse Vasallo, all these world record holders and gold medalists, and it was a very intimidating place to show up on the pool deck. And we had there were about 10 of us in what they call the animal lane. So we actually had 2 lanes typically of the 50-meter pool, and we were training at least 100,000 meters a week. We would train 6 days a week, 5 hours a day, 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoon, plus an hour in the weight room. So we were 30 hours in the pool and another 6 hours in the weight room every week. And if you missed a practice, you made it up on Sunday. So I never missed because I needed Sunday to recover. So it was a good introduction to, how your body can really acclimate to tough conditions. And I think it served me well during my marathon swimming career.
So for anybody that knows anything about swimming, and I wouldn't consider myself much of an expert on pool swimming, you just rattled off some of the top coaches in the country and the world.
I don't want to leave out my collegiate coach either, Ron Johnson. I didn't go back to Auburn. I decided to go to Arizona State University because I really missed the sunshine and training outdoors. So, and that was a really good decision for me because Ron Johnson had just recently been the Mexican national team coach and had coached at the 68 Olympics in Mexico City. And he had the world record holder at that time. I think his name is Guillermo Escoveria, he had the world record in the 1,500 meters. So he really was a distance-oriented coach and really the right guy for me. We were really great friends for a long period of time.
Okay, and then at a certain point, you joined the professional circuit. Tell us how, first of all, how you even knew there was a professional circuit, how you got involved in it, and then you absolutely set the thing on fire. Tell us about those early years.
Well, I was training for the Olympics in 1980, and then I never believed that we would boycott as a country. I just, the rumors were out there, the discussions were out there, but until they actually signed the paper or told I don't know exactly how President Carter made it official, but he did. And it was right after the NCAAs, I think it was in April of 1980. And I was thinking, well, now what do I want to do? That was my whole goal the last 4 years of training for that opportunity. So I had read a little blurb in Swimming World magazine about an open water swimming race. This one was the one they have down in Argentina in the Rio Coronda. And that I had read about that. And at the Nationals that spring in April, I talked to Sid Cassidy, and ask him about the Atlantic City race, which I'd also heard about. And so he gave me a contact name for Jim Whalen, who I called, and he was helping to organize a race at that time. And he had helped restart the race. He was a lifeguard in Atlantic City, and then he went on to be a senator in New Jersey, and mayor, and then senator. Well, that's how it all started. And so I went to my first race in 1980, not really knowing a thing. Thankfully, I met Sam Fries along the way in Mission Viejo when I was training one day. He was there for a swim meet and asked me what I was doing because I had been given what I consider poor advice by an unnamed coach who had swum the English Channel. And he told me, I have to gain a lot of weight. And so I gained 35 pounds from between the nationals and like 6 weeks later. It was really I mean, it was crazy. I went from 148 pounds to 183 pounds in like 6 weeks. I looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy. And
did you own an In-N-Out burger at the end of it or something?
I felt terrible. I looked terrible. I was swimming really slow. And that's when Sam introduced me. Sam Fries was the coach at the University of Arkansas at that time. And he introduced me to Charles Sylvia, who is one of the most famous coaches ever, in my opinion, and well known around the Swimming Hall of Fame. He was chairman for a while. But Coach Sylvia was the coach at Springfield College and wrote a lot of literature on life saving, and really a man before his time. He had already analyzed. He was really excellent at physiology. He was in anatomy, and he was the first coach I ever had that really understood how the shoulder worked. And so, and he could correct your stroke to make sure you didn't have any shoulder pain. And I probably learned more from him than anybody as far as how to acclimate in different conditions, whether cold or hot. And without him, I really wouldn't have had much of a career in marathon swimming. I think I would have been 1 or 2 years and done. But he really set the table for me. And he also had coached people across the English Channel. So he knew what he was doing, especially when it came to cold water. He said, Paul, you don't need to gain all this weight. What you need to do is acclimate to the cold and keep your heart rate up. So that's what I learned to do. I trained a lot in cold water. My first few years, it was still a struggle for me, and I didn't enjoy it. Kid growing up in Florida and going to school in Arizona, didn't see a lot of cold water, that's for sure. But after I swam the English Channel in '85, I think that was the year I really I really committed myself to acclimating and doing well in cold water races, and I did after that.
So we talked to Stefan Laca a couple of days ago, and we talked to him about the English Channel, and he said he kind of finished his professional career, and he did the English Channel because when he told people he was a marathon swimmer and kind of world champion, they kind of asked him, well, did you ever swim the English Channel? And when he used to say no, they would kind of dismiss him. Yeah. So he went after his best training days were over, and he just did it. I get the impression you didn't just do it. You considered it a race.
Yeah, I did. I really wanted to break Penny Dean's record. She had the record at that time at 7 hours and 40 minutes, and I knew I could swim it that fast or faster. We figured we could go somewhere between 7 hours and 7:30, which is the speed I would do my races. But the channel was really, it's all about the currents and the day you get to do it. And I had the same experience in the book I wrote, Marathon Swimming, the Sport of the Soul. I talk about exactly what Stephen just said, because you would talk about, what did you do this summer? Well, I went and did these marathon swimming races and won a world championships. And then they would say, have you ever swum the English Channel? And if you said no, they would just change the subject. It's like you weren't really a good swimmer. And so it was like, part of it was that. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go, I might as well go and try and do well. So that, I did well. I did set a men's world record at that time and had the fastest time of that year. But and I did it twice that year. I did it I guess about 2 weeks apart, and then I came back in 1989, I think. I forget now, and tried it again. But it's a great accomplishment. I will say that swimming solo swims is very different than racing, because solo swims, you get to pick the day. You don't pick a day that's lousy. You pick a day that's going to give you the best result. And the racing is not like that. You line up on the beach in the morning with everybody else, and if it's raining and windy or whatever, the currents aren't that good that day, you still start. And so that's that. And I did like that. I liked the camaraderie of the racing. I only did 5 solo swims in my career, 3 English channels, one race around Manhattan, and then the crossing of Nantucket Sound from Nantucket to Cape Cod.
Before we get to Nantucket, I know you're like unbelievable swimmer. That's a correct one thing you said.
Okay.
You don't get to pick the day with good conditions. You get to pick the day that you hope will end up having good conditions by the time you're done.
Yeah, that's true.
You never know what surprises it's going to throw at you after a few hours.
That's true. Definitely. I coached a swimmer across the English Channel one time, and we started out, it was great conditions, and by the time we finished, they were 6 to 8 foot swells. It was ugly.
Yeah. I always tell people we'll know when we're done what the conditions were.
Yeah.
Tell us about Nantucket, how it all came about, what the motivation was, and about the actual swim.
I didn't go back to Capri that year because my daughter Kendall was being born, and so I decided to not go. And along that time, I also met a gentleman by the name of Dave McGilvery, who was a race director, and I had done a couple little relay races on teams with him in the Massachusetts area, and he asked me would I be interested in that swim, and because no one had ever done it. And so it was really a blessing because Coach Sylvia came along, as well as, and Coach Sylvia was there in 1985 at English Channel too. And then his daughter, Susan, and her husband, and it was really like a family affair on the boat that day. And we had a really good boat captain, Ron Kramer, and he had worked out the tide charts and the currents, and it was all an estimate because no one had done it, and the tide charts back in 1986 were not as good as they are today. And the thing that we all underestimate is there's a lot of shoals out there, and so as you know, the current's got to go from east to west in that location, and so when it hits these shoals, it speeds up. The same volume of water has to get from point A to point B, and so when that tube gets squeezed, the water has to go faster. So we got pushed way further east than we ever thought we were going to. We were swimming from south to north, and we ended up way east of where we wanted to be, which was Hyannis Beach. And so we ended up having to swim directly into the current, and ended up what we thought was going to be an 8-hour swim ended up being a 12-hour swim. It's kind of what you said before. You hope the conditions are going to be what they're going to be. And the thing that was really spooky is we ended up having to swim about the last 2 or 3 hours at night, and that was not something we were really prepared for. We had one nightstick that I stuck in my suit so I didn't lose track of me. But it was, and there's a lot of whales in that area. There's a lot of sharks in that area, and it's not a swim I would do today because the Marine Mammal Act that was put in place in the 1980s, I think, now has brought about the populations of the seals in Nantucket and Cape Cod, and there's big great white populations there now. So it's not really a race I would.
Was that the first time you had swum into the darkness?
No, I'd done it in 1985 when I started a unsuccessful double crossing in Lake St. John. I didn't finish the race, and we started at 10 o'clock at night. So I think that was and actually the first time I swam at night was in Latuke, my very first year in 1980. They had a 24-hour relay race, a 2-man relay race. I did it with James Kegley, but the course was fairly lit because it was a small lake called Lake Louis in Latuke, in the town of Latuke, and it was about a third of a mile each loop. So it wasn't totally dark. But I was the first time swimming in the dark in a saltwater environment where I knew there were sharks.
Didn't you just point to the land and go, we can land here. We don't have to go to go to Hyannis Beach?
I know, looking back, we should have done that, but we had promised Dave we were going to finish at Hyannis Beach, but we should have just gone and recorded our time on the beach and then got in the boat, and then, I could just swim from the boat into the shore. No one would have known the difference. It was dark at night. So.
And in our solo sport, most of the time we go, it's a crossing. Land to land is good enough.
I know. I don't know what we were thinking. We would have saved ourselves about 3 hours.
When you do these 24-hour relay races, do you agree ahead of time you're each going to do an hour or two, or do you yell, "I'm tired, get in here"? How does it work?
Yeah, we did. We tried to determine. We wanted to break the record that was held by John Kinsella and Bill Heiss, and they had set it, I don't know, a year or two earlier, and I think it was something they had done like 203 loops, and so we were determined to break their record. So we determined that the best way for us to do it would be to swim 3 laps and rest 3 laps, swim 3 laps, rest 3 laps. So we did that for 24 hours. One time I was too cold to get back in, and James swam 4 laps. So I needed a little more time to warm up. So, but we ended up doing, I think, 207 loops, which would have been almost 70 miles. I guess that's 69 miles in 24 hours. So each of us would have swam about 35 miles, I guess.
When you made Kegley do the 4th lap, did you tell him when he was coming around the 3rd, or did you just hide? How did you?
No,
did he speak to you afterwards?
Yeah, no, I didn't tell him because I was in the little house warming up. So I sent somebody else out there to tell him. And we were writing notes to each other all night long. When we were resting, we would leave notes for each other, notes of encouragement. And we said this the other day when I was writing my book, and I was talking to him about that, and we both wished we had saved those notes. That would have been a good to base the book on those notes. But it was a lot of fun for James and I that year, because we were both just recent college graduates. He had just graduated from the University of Indiana, and we were winning the races. I mean, we were top 3 pretty much every weekend. And it was also the hardest thing we ever did. And I think that, other than probably the Tour de France, I think those races, doing marathon races on consecutive weekends, is probably the hardest other sport in the world. I mean, people look at it individually, but we would do 5 races like over 6 weekends. So every weekend we were racing, and you really couldn't recover from week to week. So the person that you were afraid of the next race was the one who didn't finish the week before. Maybe only swam 3 hours instead of 7 or 8 hours. And so that was, it was rough. And I didn't finish one race in past BBAC that year. And that really did change the course of my career, watching athletes finish a race in extremely poor conditions, rough, cold, foggy, windy, and I thought nobody was going to finish. I got out after a couple hours, and then went back to my room, took a nap, had some pizza, and then somebody knocks on my door and says, "Hey, come back down to the beach. The swimmers are finishing." I said, "What do you mean they're finishing?" And so I went back down there, and I saw Claudio Plitt, come in first. And the guy is just a titan, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, he was blue as could be, but maybe gray. Bill Heiss finished. It was Nasser Shazli finished. It was just, I said, I'm never going to get out of a race again until I really know that I've given it my best. And I think that got me in a little trouble the next year in Lac St. John, when I did pass out from hypothermia about 1,000 meters from the finish. So that was pretty scary for everybody. Not for me, because I was out of it, but for my brother, who was in the boat for the first time, and for everybody involved, for all the safety people and my friends there. And it was a very scary experience for them.
In your professional career on the circuit, you were kind of first and second in just about everything you touched for those 6 years. And then you had a continuation of your career where you weren't as competitive. Tell us, first of all, why, and then what did it do to your head? Because you're probably a pretty competitive character.
That's a great question. So the first from 1980 through 1986, those years I really was able to commit and devote myself to the sport. And I was a CPA at that time, so I really wasn't able to start my training until after April 15th. And so after April 15th, I would really gear up. And then I would take the month of June and go down to Mission Viejo and train full time. And then, so I typically would have like at least about 6 or 8 weeks of really time that I could really get back in great shape. And then Kendall, my daughter, was born in 1986. So I had basically told everybody I was going to retire because I said, because this was happening. And but the next year, in 1987, I got invited back to Capri, and it's like, I think I could, get back in little shape. And I had lost 10 pounds. I typically would race around 170 pounds, between 170 and 175 pounds. And I had dropped, over 10 pounds. I was down under 160 pounds. And a lot of that was because I didn't have much muscle mass anymore. And so, but that summer I still did well. I won Capri. I won another race, and then I won a race in Cancun. I think there were only 3 races available, and they didn't let me swim in Magog because they had given me a big retirement party the year before. So they said you can't swim because you said you weren't going to. So I only could compete in 3 races that year, and I was in marginal shape. But it got me back involved, and I love the sport. I love training. I love the travel. I love the friendships I've made over the years. And so I just said, well, I'm going to do the best I can. And then in 1989, I got invited to come back to try the double crossing of Lac Saint Jean. And that was that year I was just completely committed to completing that crossing. And that was the hardest swim I ever did. It's a 64-kilometer race in cold conditions and rough and dark at night, like we talked about. And so that was, a lot of this I talk about in the book I wrote, and we'll get to that. I know you're going to ask me that about the book in a little bit, but that was really an incredible experience for me. And it's probably the race I'm the most proud of. But back to your question, winning is the best thing. I loved winning for sure. But at the same time, I was doing what I love to do. I could still take some time off of work in the summer and travel and race and compete and see friends. And I mean, if you're doing what you love, I mean, there's no downside to that. And the Kendall and Logan, and was born in 1990, were able to travel, and then the really cool experience I did was getting back in shape in 1998. When I had taken a break from the sport for 6 years, and I I was engaged to Marilyn, who's my wife now for almost 21 years. And I wanted to show her what the sport was about. And Kendall and Logan were so young when I stopped. They were only 6 and 2. They really didn't have much memory of it. So I also wanted to show them what the sport was about. So I got back in shape and the best shape I could. And I went into Magog, and I got thoroughly humiliated, what I think is humiliated. I don't even think I was in the top 10. I can't remember, but I didn't finish that great, and I didn't feel that great. And I knew I was in good shape, but what I didn't realize was I was 41, and at that age, I just needed more time to rest before that first race, and my training had gone really well. And so then the next couple of weeks, I just rested and went to Atlantic City and swam really well, and got 6th place, I think, there a couple weeks later. And I felt very good about that. And then in 2003, I got in shape and did Capri, because they were reviving the race. And at first I told Marilyn, let's go back and we'll support Luciano and the new race and just be there. And about a day later, I said, no, I think I need to swim, not watch from a boat. So, but it was really good that I did that, because then I got back in shape, and then I just kept up my training and to prepare for the 50th anniversary of the Lac Saint Jean race the next summer, which I knew was going to be much more difficult for me at 47 and get ready to race in cold water. And I was pretty happy with that performance there as well. I don't know. I mean, I placed 18th or something, but I didn't care. It was really to complete a 21-mile race like that on cold water. And it was interesting to see how the sport had progressed too, since I had last race. In fact, Stefan Lacotte was the one, after Capri, we stopped to visit him in Paris. He said, Paul, you have to wear the full bodysuit. He said, it's so much faster. And I didn't really believe him. And so until I tried it myself, he gave me one of his old ones, and I just couldn't believe how much faster it is. I mean, it's remarkably faster. I mean, yeah. You're talking minutes per mile, maybe a minute faster per mile. I mean, and you do that over 20 miles. That's a lot of time. So it's, I don't know. Do they allow those in the channel, the full bodysuits?
You can get in the water in England with a full bodysuit. You can swim over to a place called France, but it doesn't go on any kind of record, and it's you don't write your name on the wall in the pub, and you don't talk about it. Yeah. Let's go on to your coaching career. You coached at 2 Olympics, and I'm interested in what you learned coaching that you maybe didn't know swimming. The moment where you kind of went, okay.
I think the best moment for me was Mark Schubert was then the national team director for USA Swimming, and asked me to help advise, and originally just as an advisor, but then I was going to all the and Steve and I were on the national team together to Australia at the World Championships in 2007 in Melbourne. And what I learned was that a lot of the coaches, they're just pool coaches. They didn't really know anything about open water swimming. And that was pretty eye-opening, but not surprising, because they didn't have experience. They had experience coaching swimmers in the pool. So the hardest thing was to get them to understand that they needed to train in the open water. And the athletes, even on that trip, there was an athlete who had never even swum in open water. And she was on the world championship team, swimming the 5K. She'd qualified from the pool. So it was pretty surprising. But I remember one day feeling some frustration, it wasn't that year, but, and about the athletes and their willingness to do this or that. And Mark just said, Paul, they're not you. You have to remember that. And so that was good that for me to hear that from a coach, to say, you can't put your expectations on somebody else. They have to come up with that themselves. So that was probably the most important thing that I learned. And I will say those 7 years were such a blessing for me, and getting to know the coaches and the athletes and the staff, and traveling and reconnecting with a lot of friends from the past. And I felt like that I was able to make a significant contribution in the path for USA Swimming, for the open water national team, to teach them what it really took to be successful. And I think we showed that when I first arrived, we were nothing on the national scene, international scene. We didn't have anybody any good, except Chip Peterson was really good. He had actually, I shouldn't say we didn't have anybody. There were a couple athletes that were excellent. Chip Peterson had won the world championships, I think the year before in Montreal, in the 5 and the 10K. He was a gold medalist. And so he was really good. And there had been some very, very good women in the past. But as a team, we weren't strong. And when we went to the world championships in Naples, Italy, I think in 2006, maybe, I got the years mixed up. I think it might have been 2006. We just weren't competitive as a country, and we also had a pretty big ego that we and none of that was about who I felt we should be. I always tried to teach we could be the fiercest in the water and the friendliest on the beach, and I felt that was who we needed to be. And it wasn't until we got to Italy, and so we went through the 2008 Olympics, which was a really interesting experience. I don't think either of the athletes performed to the level that they were capable of. I think simply because we didn't have a lot of open water experience, and we didn't train a lot in open water, and their coaches didn't really believe in it. So I think it wasn't until 2009 that at the World Championships in Italy, that we had a group of really tough kids, including Fran Crippen and Emily Bruneman, Emily Hansen, Eva, I'm forgetting Eva's last name, but she's still swimming, and Andrew Gemmel, Alex Meyer. I mean, it was really a tough, Eva Fabian, a tough group of athletes, and they really showed that we trained a lot in open water. We got there early. We did an open water training camp, and made a huge difference. I mean, Fran Crippen ended up getting a silver medal, and Gemmel, or bronze, I think, and Andrew Gemmel was silver, and it was finally we had a group of athletes who were committed to being open water swimmers. And then in 2010, really we went to the World Championships in Quebec, and we did a training camp in cold water the week before. And I think that's when we really showed the world how good the United States could be in open water swimming, because we got second overall to the Italians in the team trophy. And really, we had a couple of things happen that I think we were second by like 5 points. And we had a couple of things happen during the competition that really, we had the athletes to win, and we just had some unusual things happen with disqualifications and performances that we were counting on that didn't come through. But that was the first time we really showed the world that we could be good as a country. And I think since then, they've done a great job. I think that going into the Olympics in 2012, Haley Anderson and Alex Meyer had both qualified, and both had excellent chances at medals. Alex then had a very bad bike accident, and I think it was February, broke his collarbone, had to have surgery, and he and his coach did a great job preparing for the Olympics after he was able to get back in the water. But it was just a long time out of the water right before the Olympics. And but Haley Anderson did end up getting a silver medal there, which was very exciting, and super proud of her. And Alex ended up, I think, 10th. But he did all he could in the short amount of time he could. But at the same time, I think it was also still a good showing. And then they still have we have right now going into the next Olympics with Haley Anderson and Ashley Twitchell on the women's side, both now very experienced athletes in open water. And then I think the team has a lot of racing experience now, which wasn't like it was in the past, but I would like to see them still race a lot more. The European countries are much more committed to open water than our athletes are. Our athletes try and do both. They try and do pool, they try and do open water, because they're great athletes. And the Europeans, they don't try and do both. They just 100% committed to the open water.
Last question for you, Paul. You recently wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about it, but I'm curious again, what you learned looking at your life to write the book.
I've been wanting to write a book for quite a while, and we were actually in Capri, and I was talking to Marilyn about it, and she just says, "Great, what would the chapters be?" So I told her what the chapters were going to be, because I had thought about it so often. So when I sat down to write the book, the writing was really easy. I didn't expect so much emotion while I was writing. I think that was probably one of the biggest surprises for me. I also didn't expect that I really felt the presence of God so much when I was writing the book, and that was an incredible blessing. And I missed that. I missed that intimacy, I'll call it. And on a day-to-day basis, because I would get to my office early, like I just looked at it like I was preparing for a race, and I used the same discipline to write the book. I just would get to the office at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd try and get an hour and a half to 2 hours of writing in before work, and then I would write on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was typically my big day. I would write 4 to 6 hours, and then not quite as much on Sunday. And a good friend of mine, Ken McAlpine, who's a great author himself, he and an open water swimmer. He's done the Atlantic City race. He said, once you start riding, ride every day. If you miss a day, don't miss 2 days. And that was great advice. He told me Ernest Hemingway's goal was 500 words a day. And so, I think that, and swimming's a lot like that. You just take it day by day. You train day by day for a goal, and before you know it, you're prepared, and the goal is here, and you're going to do well.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time today. I will always remember that induction of yours down in Florida, and I was kind of going, wow, and the amazement continues. So thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you for having me.